Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be doing an updated look at the 2024 gubernatorial elections, and I'll be analyzing these races where they stand as of right now, and providing my predictions for what would happen if the elections were held, today or tomorrow. So again, it's been a little over a month, I would believe, since I've last done an update on these governor's races, and a little bit has changed. I think nationally more has changed than locally. Democrats are, I would say, in a worse spot nationally than they were the last time I did one of these videos. But regardless um, of any, I would say, type of statewide election, gubernatorial elections are often the least impacted by what goes on nationally, which is why often Democrats win in red states and Republicans win in blue states. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the thing you'll notice but when you see this map is that we have a lot of incumbent governors who are retiring or not running for re-election. So most of these states, we have open races. Like, for example, North Dakota, Doug Burgum ran for president, and I actually think he was term limited anyways. Same with Eric Holcomb in Missouri, or in Indiana, excuse me. So that's why we have some of these seats that are open, but none of them, or the majority of them, aren't going to be competitive. I think North Dakota, Utah, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia are all in the safe column for the GOP. We have Phil Scott, who is running for re-election in Vermont. He's a very popular GOP governor there. I believe he is likely to win re-election. And for the Democrats, I'm only going to put Delaware in the safe column. John Carney, the incumbent governor, is retiring, but Democrats should have no problem holding on to this governorship. So the interesting states, to some extent, are Washington, Montana, New Hampshire, and North Carolina. So the first one I'll talk about is Montana. Montana is a interesting race because we have Greg Gianforte, who is running for re-election. He won by around 10 points in 2020, which might not seem like that impressive performance, but he beat a pretty popular Lieutenant Governor Mike Cooney. And we also know that Gianforte is a pretty popular governor. He enjoys a high approval rating, and in terms of primary turnout, Democrats are better than Republicans. Now, I'm putting this in likely column not because I think it's going to be particularly close, but because we're still a little far out. Montana governor races are always very strange. Again, in early 2012, a lot of people might not have thought Democrats were competitive, but as the campaign progressed, Democrats were very competitive and ended up winning that race. So, not that I think Greg Gianforte is doing anything wrong or is polling poorly per se, but there is room for this race to maybe go from a 15-point margin to a 12-point margin or something of that nature. So Montana in the likely GOP column. And then the other likely state that I'm going to put on here is Washington. Now, Washington, I think, is actually closer than Montana. If we take a look at the race here, it's interesting because this race, the Republican candidate is very strong. It's likely to be Dave Reichert, who was the former representative for the 8th Congressional District, which is the swingy district in the suburbs that flipped blue in 2018 and has stayed blue since then. But again, he is someone that is a popular, former representative from a Democratic-leaning area outside of the state's largest city. And so he is a good candidate. Now, the Democrats have a fine candidate. They're likely to run Bob Ferguson, who's the Attorney General of the state, who's won statewide. So this isn't really a race where Republicans have a candidate that can beat out a no-name Democrat. But the fact that it's an open seat and the fact that Republicans fielded, I think, the best candidate they could have fielded is a good sign for them. So this state, I think, will be closer. Biden could win Washington by 15 to 17 points presidentially, but I think that the governor's race could be even half that margin for Democrats, maybe a 9 or 10-point win. But I would still be very shocked if this race is actually super close, but it will be close in the presidential race by a considerable amount. So that leaves us to our two states on the East Coast here, which are North Carolina and New Hampshire. We're going to talk about New Hampshire first, I think, because New Hampshire, I think, is a bit less consequential than North Carolina, but these are states that are both pretty close at this point. So Chris Sununu would have locked the seat down for Republicans, but he retired. So Kelly Ayotte is likely to be the GOP nominee. Chuck Morse is also running, and he has a chance, but I'm going to assume it's Ayotte. And then for the Democrats, they're likely to run Joyce Craig, who's the former mayor of Manchester, the state's largest city. Now, the interesting thing about this race is that we don't, I believe, have a lot of polling for the general election. Yeah, we only have 2 polls, and they both show Ayotte winning. This one, she's up by 9, but that's from August of last year. Then we got one from Emerson in November. She's up by 3, which I believe. And then for the predictions, they're all toss-ups. So this is a race that's considered to be very close. I think this actually could be the closest governor's race this year, depending on what happens in North Carolina. For now, I'm going to give Republicans the slight edge here. And this is for a few reasons. The first is that the one good poll we have here, it is from November of last year, so take it with a grain of salt, does show Kelly winning. And, she's not up by a lot. She's only up by 3. But I think the fact that she has name recognition across this state is pretty good for her. She was the former senator. Now, she did lose in 2016, obviously, to Maggie Hassan, who was the former governor of New Hampshire. But she still won in 2010. She was still, a senator for the state for 6 years. And New Hampshire, people in New Hampshire know who she is. Joyce Craig, is the mayor of the city's largest state, is certainly known to a good chunk of the electorate. But I think that, just off the get-go, the fact that Ayotte has kind of name recognition helps her. She also has won statewide before, as Craig has not. And then another important thing to remember is that, kind of like what I said, Montana, New Hampshire has a streak of electing Republican governors, even if it's blue presidentially. Chris Sununu was elected, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So he won 4 terms, and this is a state that is not afraid to split their ticket. I think Biden will win New Hampshire by maybe only a little less than 2020, maybe around a 5-point margin, if that. But Joyce Craig could underperform him by a good amount. And especially in a year where maybe Trump does better nationwide than people think, maybe Republicans do a little better here than expected. This is a super close race. I don't have any strong feelings about it. If you want to make the case for Craig being the favorite, I totally see that. But I think for now, I'm going to give it to the person who's a bit more well-known and does lead in the one good poll we have, albeit narrowly. So the last state is North Carolina. North Carolina is interesting. It's a big state. It is likely to vote for Trump at the top of the ticket this year. Not by too much, probably by around 3 to 5 points. But Democrats have done well here down ballot. And I don't just mean the governor's race, right? Like, Democrats hold the Secretary of State office. I believe they hold the Treasurer's office and the Attorney General's office. And speaking of the Attorney General office, the Attorney General of North Carolina is Josh Stein, and he's the Democratic nominee for governor here. So Josh Stein is a good candidate. He's won statewide before, and he's done it in very close races. In 2020, he won by, I think, 0.2%. So he's no stranger to winning by very narrow margins. Now, his opponent, I think, is a problem for the GOP. Mark Robinson is a very controversial figure. And I know he's won statewide before, as has Josh Stein. But, I think it's important to consider the context of that election. Robinson won by 3 points in 2020, so he did fine, right? Like, that alone doesn't concern anyone. But he was a lot less well-known then, and we now know that he's made comments about how, the world would be better if women weren't allowed to vote. He made a statement at a church even a few weeks ago where he said some folks just need killing. And he is very outspoken in his disdain for people in the LGBTQ plus community. So there are, he carries a lot of baggage with him. He's a controversial figure, and I think North Carolina is a Republican-leaning state, but it is not a state that is, as socially conservative as, maybe neighboring Tennessee or Alabama. So that's what we have to remember, that there's a lot of moderate voters in these suburbs who might even still vote for Trump, who will not vote for Mark Robinson. And again, Josh Stein's won statewide before. Voters have chosen him before, both in 2016 and 2020, and he's won. Those are 2 years where Trump won the state at the top of the ticket. I think he'll do it again. This race, to me, is a lean Democratic race. It's by no means gone for Republicans, but it does kind of, ring similar to the 2022 Pennsylvania governor's race. I don't think, obviously, in the end, Josh Stein will win by 14, but it's a popular attorney general running against a Republican candidate who really is not does not get a lot of confidence from the circles within his party. And you also have to remember that in 2022, by the end of the summer, Republicans had given up on Mastriano. I'm not saying they've done that yet for Robinson, but if they think they have a better shot at winning in New Hampshire, they're going to really invest in Kelly Ayotte, who they know and trust, and I think compared to Mark Robinson. So there's a lot of room for the GOP to fall in this race, and I think, kind of like how I feel safer picking Republicans in New Hampshire, I think I feel safer picking Democrats in North Carolina. And wow, that was a very loud bolt of lightning, or thunder rather, but it struck it lightning at the same time. So I think that's my sign to end this video here. Again, my apologies for that. I don't know how well that came through on my microphone, but that's my updated prediction. Democrats win 3 governorships, Republicans win 8, and this is, I'd say, a pretty successful year for Republicans. Obviously, it could be better in North Carolina, but I think holding on in New Hampshire at this point could be a main area, a main concern for them, because again, that's a state with a state legislature that could certainly flip blue in the near future, as North Carolina Republicans are kind of guaranteed to hold the state legislature for a while. So again, let me know what you think, and as always, I'll see you all in the next video.